Good morning, everybody, to our last webinar in the series of standardization for researchers. And today I'm not alone. Last week, Mirko Böhn was with me. Today, Barbara Reiter from the University of Graz. Therefore, we share our 1 hour in two halves. Give me a minute to share the slides. So. Now you should have the full screen. Yes, let's start. I think I can go over the background quite easily. EDU4Standards is the framework project beyond this pilot, and we have this kind of initially EARTO researcher-focused pilot. Now I know that the Marie Curie Alumni Association is also distributing or has distributed the links, at least for the last 3 lectures. Therefore, maybe some former Marie Curie fellows are also with us. And that's the background. And please visit the homepage, sign up for the newsletter, and follow us to also maybe accompany us in the last year of the project. That will be 26, because the project will end at the December 26. We had these different target groups, maybe 3 different levels of experts, and today we are really addressing a quite ambitious set of topics. That means here geopolitics, technological sovereignty, and also values. Topics which are not really mainstream in standardization, but also from the spirit of our project, which aims to foster the role of European values and interest in standardization, especially in international standardization. This is quite important, and therefore I start a little bit with the geopolitics, and then Barbara takes over. Means now we are at module number 6, the last one, and I can already say we will redo that in 26. I have to find out which are the 6 weeks which fit best into my schedule, that we have it really in a row. And also this idea of having these sessions kind of maybe ahead of the day I think was quite successful. But now let's get into the content of today's lecture. As I said, we will divide that in 2 parts. I will talk about the geopolitics, technology sovereignty, and standardization, before Barbara takes then over talking about ethics, values in standardization. A little bit the kind of a dense agenda, starting with the geopolitics, then getting into technological sovereignty, and then the role of standards and standardization as a mechanism to safeguard technological sovereignty. We have a small example on mobile communication, which has been also discussed in the literature. We conclude with some recommendations and also the challenges we might face. You find some papers on this topic. The baseline paper on technological sovereignty is the work together with my colleagues at the Fraunhofer Institute, published in Research Policy, and it's more or less the most cited paper on technological sovereignty. Therefore, this is the baseline, and based on this, I put together initially just some thoughts. At the end, it turned out be a paper being published in Technological Focus Social Change. We are especially focusing on standardization and standards as safeguards for tech sovereignty. But this is a snapshot, and certainly more has to come in this context, and also will come. What are our learning objectives of my part? First, to get a little bit an idea what are the geopolitical dimensions of standardization, then to understand the concept of tech sovereignty, and then in the next step, what is the role of standardization and standards to achieve or secure tech sovereignty. Then we have this specific examples, but we have also to discuss the challenges. And maybe you face also some of these challenges when you are already active in standardization in your standardization work. Why is this topic really very relevant and becoming even more relevant every day if you are following a little bit the news? On the one hand, okay, technological competition has become quite intense. This is not new. That's not new, despite also Draghi report. That's not really path breaking, but Europe is really under pressure. Also in Germany, we have a kind of heavy debate that kind of our ambition to be kind of technological leader even in Europe is under pressure, and there are new forces. China is one important player, but the other player who is going to enter the game is India, and the next kind of critical development, what we see is that technological competition has been expanded to also a competition related to systems, also democratic systems and values. And this has been already addressed in the EU Standardization Strategy 22. Also, the Harris-Biden administration kind of underlined that with their strategy. The current Trump administration hasn't. I haven't seen an official paper how they deal with standardization, but we'll come back to that. Then this has been kind of further triggered by, on the one hand, the corona pandemic already showed the vulnerability of value chains, supply chains, and then with the Russian attack of the Ukraine, also energy security and safety was a topic, or is still a topic, especially in Europe. And then there was some reaction on that. The one kind of group argued, okay, we should maybe become much more protectionist and maybe closed. And on the other hand, there's still the ambition to determine their own future quite independent. And in this context, also innovation policy came into play, because innovation is key for competitiveness. And in parallel, we have the green and digital transition, especially the Green Deal was at least 2 or 3 years ago kind of top priority of the European Commission, and innovation is one kind of instrument to achieve maybe both objectives. Now the focus has also turned towards industrial policy as additional kind of approach to also consider security, defense, and even value issues. Now, what has this to do with standardization? On the one hand, standards have different roles in the different dimensions of geopolitics. There's this geographical dimension. Okay, that's the location where the countries are located. That's exogenous. Yeah, we're not going to change that. Good, some countries want to change borders, what we see currently in different parts of the world. But standards, nevertheless, are key and playing also a key role in infrastructures, railways, but also mobility and also meanwhile IT. Therefore, this is key. And one explicit example is the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, where China kind of is not only interested in creating common kind of markets, but also implementing common standards. That's not so prominent, but that's the issue. Then we have the cultural dimensions, language, identity, ethics, and here Barbara comes into play. These are really long-term framework conditions and dimensions which cannot really easily change. But nevertheless, in the EU Strategy 22, here the democratic values were really kind of highlighted, and that also standardization should reflect that, and that will be done by Barbara. Then we have the environmental dimensions. Again, natural resources are again tied to geography, but we have also kind of global environmental challenges, in particular climate change, and here standards can help. And there are also empirical evidence that standards can push progress in protection. Then nowadays very important is also the military dimension. We have these geopolitical conflicts, wars, and NATO standards are key for procurement of weapons, but also are key for ICT systems and also very important for cyber security topics. And here the ISO IC 27001 is maybe an example for such a standards. Then standards and technology. I think here the whole lecture underlined the close relationships. Standards important for economies of scale, but also networks, and mobile communication standards are a strategic asset, and later we'll have an example of that. And then we have the economic dimensions. In the single market, standards are key. They can help to strengthen companies and global competitiveness. They can share also shape the trade flows. Standards in trade is key. Standards in global value chains, and therefore the influence on international standard setting is quite important, because international standards promote trade flows, both exports and imports are also becoming more important. Think about the discussion about chips for specific kind of high-tech applications. Technology sovereignty, we define that as the ability of a state, of a federation of states, that means the European Union, to develop technology which deemed to be critical for its welfare, competitive, and the ability to act or source them. That means if you cannot do everything, even as you, from other economic areas, without really getting in a one-sided structural dependency. And it's a dynamic concept, because it's about the future ability to determine the well-being and value system. And therefore we have to on the one hand strive for domestic competences, but also structural interdependence. And this is quite a different concept than just go for autarky. Now, moving to standardization is here to show you today what is the role of standards and standardization in safeguarding tech sovereignty, and what are the conditions. That means also what are the context factors, what are maybe some messages, but also what are the challenges you might face in order to realize this role. The problem is there was not really a conceptual framework on addressing these things. There are different works we always address on standards and innovation, trade, maybe also public policies. But here standards can come into play. The starting point is what I already presented to you is standardization as a knowledge and technology transfer. And is this the important role of standards for innovations. Then there's insight that standards influence trade flows and therefore technological stability. And EU standards are quite key, and we have currently the consultation regarding the impact assessment of a change of the regulation 1025, where these topics are also playable. Therefore, in our thinking, we see that the R&D input is key, especially people, and you are the people, you are the experts which are needed. The output, also scientific publications, patents, the essential patents in particular, are important input for standards. We addressed that in previous lectures. Also another topic, software and open source, we addressed that last week with the talk by Mirko Böhm, also new, and we have also now empirical evidence that's really growing. We look at the standards for trade flows and also the role of standards in regulation, public procurement, and other public policies. And if we bring all this stuff together, we are getting to this really messy picture, where standards, we highlighted, is a little bit the key in assuring tax sovereignty. This picture is a little bit over complex, just to show you how the different things kind of interact. Now, looking at the different drivers for standardization and standards as a safeguarding mechanism, human resources, that means here get the researchers like you into standardization, and also in parallel, human resources are key for R&D innovation activity. That means we have the experts to be in the standardization meetings, in the working groups, in order to really safeguard our interests and values, which will be there later. R&D then as maybe a broader concept, again, we had a whole lecture on this topic, is also quite key to bring their own R&D results into the standards, because then it's assured that the implementation of the standards is based on the own work. In detail, publications can be the base. We talked about standard development publications, patents, if they are declared to be standard essential in particular. This means that then also the standards are accessible and can be implemented by everybody who is agreeing to the licensing conditions. Software, especially open source, which is accessible by everybody, helps also to safeguard technological sovereignty. Innovation, that means here standards can help to promote the innovation capabilities of companies and countries, and therefore, if we have here innovative content in the standards, then technological sovereignty is secured by pushing product innovations which are then maybe generated by different sets of suppliers. Therefore, also the dependence on one specific supplier is reduced. Trade flows, here standards benefit if and both kind of export and imports benefit if we really kind of agree on common international standards. Then we also can import products from a larger group of companies, kind of strengthening the independence. Finally, policy initiatives, especially public procurement, relying on international standards or reference standards and regulations, maybe also help to harmonize the regulatory frameworks across countries, which is again positive for technological sovereignty. Based on that, we derive some propositions. That means R&D active countries are much more in the position to secure their tech sovereignty via standardization, and also the hedging function of standards is here to mention. We addressed that before. However, a minimal level of R&D is certainly necessary to ensure countries, but also companies, absorptive capacity to implement standards. Patent active companies also and countries, think about China, think about Huawei regarding mobile communication, as we see later, are able to influence the trajectory of standards, and also where standards are more relevant for hardware, open source is more relevant for software, but kind of the merging of these two kind of strategies and instruments makes also important that here, especially open source content gets into standards. Public procurement based on international standards can help. International standards are crucial for competitive advantage on the one hand, but also for maybe having more choices in importing products, then also aligning the regulatory framework by maybe referring to common standards is a help to have maybe a common playing field, which is really strengthening the technological sovereignty for all countries which really rely then on these international agreed standards. And overall, we know that international standards are much more innovation friendly than regulation. Therefore, this might be an interesting instrument. Now, looking at one specific example, 5G, 6G, there is already some empirical work, some studies, some papers on this, and it's also key for military infrastructure and economic infrastructure. And this has been grown due to the increased sensitivity to related to cybersecurity. And we had discussions here in Europe, in different countries, on how to deal with the Huawei technologies in the 5G networks. And standards are key for the rollout of these technologies. And here scientific publications play a role. And here again, China is quite active. Open source is getting more and more relevant for also 5G, 6G. One specific kind of initiative is Open WAN to underline the role of open source. Standards, essential patents are on the one hand priority, but if they are declared, then everybody can use them. If one finds an agreement on the licensing deals, here patent pools can help to reduce both the costs and also the efficiencies. Test beds and demonstrators also may use standards and startups. Here we do not know too much about the role of 5G standards, but several startups kind of implement 5G now, meanwhile 6G technology in their business model. Regulation plays a role. Public procurement is an option. There is maybe certainly some room for improvement here, what we also hear in different kind of news items. And here other topics are also maybe play a role in the future, combining 6G with AI and also blockchain technology. To conclude this case here, we have again the drivers, and then you can look at the different kind of role the different elements play for securing technological sovereignty in 5G. There is some empirical evidence which shows that here it's important to bring in the own work. 5G, Europe is certainly a little bit in a defensive position. 6G it's going to start now. First specifications are drafted. I'm not sure whether they are already published, but here we have to see whether Europe is also with a stronger focus on open source as an input into the standardization work here, might really a little bit catch up to China. To conclude, yeah, what is recommended really to support R&D, also as input for standardization, but also support the skill development. And here we have EDU4Standards as an initiative, and we hope that this kind of goes on beyond the lifetime of the project. Also linkages to other programs like Horizon Europe, and here we have the strategy. We have project like the AH Booster. Also, I told you, and I will maybe share the link again to the new European Standardization Panel survey as an initiative to kind of improve the linkage between research and standardization in Europe. Open source is also a topic here. They also face problems in participation. Therefore, the interface and the synergies have to be improved. Then also standardization should follow the WTO principles I presented in previous lectures. Bilateral and multilateral collaborations. There are some initiatives, also EU projects, which try to push that. It's a little bit complicated. Patent pools might be an opportunity. Also, startups and bringing them into standardization might help to save technological sovereignty. Push standards in public procurement and also push standards in open technical infrastructures like GaiaX, or now currently the discussion about the European stack might be an important topic. Challenges to finish now is to bring researchers to standardization. Therefore, we have also these webinar series. Patents are important, but there are still some issues to really bring them in an adequate way into standards and get them reference and get kind of fair licensing deals. Not so easy. Standards are still not really completely integrated in the new product development. Although the involvement correlates positive with innovation. International standards are key for trade value chains and are also key for trade agreements here. Currently, the kind of reactivated discussion with the US, there are some problematic developments. Therefore, the gold standard are definitely international standards. Also, kind of align international standards with national regulations is a topic to avoid protectionist kind of trade policies. Also align standardization consortia and open source into the national framework. Here, the current kind of maybe change of the EU regulation 1025 might be an opportunity. And still, maybe the US big techs maybe are so strong that they are very difficult to align with the principles of technological sovereignty. That's it from my side. That means here these geopolitical developments should be considered, and especially kind of just to reconfirm and reiterate the role of research innovation for standards and standardization important, not only from a technological perspective, but also from a technological and individual sovereignty perspective, especially in such complex geopolitical times. That's it from my side, and now I hand over to you, Barbara.
Thanks a lot. It was, as ever, it was fascinating to listen to you and to get the perspective of standardization in the geopolitical perspective. So thank you very much for that, Knut, and thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me. And that's me. The photo is really old. Bravo for Knut. And the photo here is really old, but I really like it, and so I keep it. That's me. I teach ethics at the University of Graz, and I joined the project EDU4Standards in 2024 and fell basically in love with standardization because it's a beautiful process with many very engaged people from very many different parts of science and of the world. And so I'm really glad to be here and tell you something about how to integrate ethical considerations into standards and standardization. So, what I will do is I give you a very brief introduction to ethics. I don't know if you all have the same background in ethics. Usually it doesn't hurt to hear about the main motives in ethics again. Then we will look into ethics and standardization and the ethical frameworks and tools. And maybe the most important part I want to show to you is our outcome to on the second level of the project, the ILOs, the intended learning outcomes we developed in the EDU4Standards project. And I do hope we have time for questions and answers, or at least for questions, because this is philosophy. We're good at questions and sometimes at answers. And you can read about what I'm talking about in these two articles. One is actually the ILO formulation, the lower one, and we also turned this into an article which is open access at Springer. So you can look at this. Now we lost the presentation.
Sorry. What did I do? I have to click it. I have to just reactivate that. Sorry.
And somebody's in the waiting room too, I see.
Yeah, I wanted to let these people in. Therefore.
Oh, and then you.
Then I lost the slides, but I will do that in a minute. So. Okay.
Yes, excellent. So these are the two articles and the links. It's both open access, so you can read up what I'm talking about in more detail if you're interested. And I also prepared the learning outcomes on the next slide. The intended learning outcomes. So what are the objectives or learning outcomes that we want you to take with you? Well, there are ethical dimensions that are relevant for standardizations processes where we want to look at now, but we also want you to understand the relevance of ethical considerations in standardization processes and sovereignty. And that means we want you also to be able to explain the role of values in contributing to achieving and safeguarding technological sovereignty and standardization in general. And that means on the next level, you should also be then able to apply ethical thinking, both in the process of standardization and the content of standards in specific contexts. And then the next step would be, and you have realized what we are doing here. These are the 6 levels of academic work that Bloom has formulated in the mid of last century, and we still use that to formulate the competences. I will come back to that later, because it is actually a set of standards within academic learning that we use a lot. So, and the next two, so you have to know, to understand, to explain, to apply, to analyze and to evaluate is the next step. The diverse challenges faced by different countries and cultural backgrounds in standardization, because this is what Knut said earlier. We have different cultural backgrounds when we work geopolitically and worldwide, and so we have to be aware of that, and there are ethical implications of inclusion, for example. And then the last step in Bloom's taxonomy, which is basically the doctoral level, is to create and maintain ethical discourse informed by European interests and values. Like, this is the goal we are after, and now we look into how we can do this. And of course, a world without standards is a confusing world. So just think of all the rules we have in our world. And this is the big thing where ethics and standardization and all forms of regulation actually work very parallel. We formulate rules, and the rules should ideally have the normative power to make us follow them. So we can go to the next slide. So that means safety, reliability, consistency, understandability, and trust are very important elements of the process of working with standards and of developing standards. And of course, such a broad field like safety or trust is highly has a highly ethical content, and we will look at this in the next slide. So, brief introduction to ethics, that was the first one. So, ethics or moral philosophy is a discipline of philosophy, and it is thus also the discipline where we ask a lot of what is questions. So, what is a standard? What is standardization? But also, what is trust and what does safety mean? And usually starts this with that what is question starts a process of critical thinking and does not necessarily come up with answers in a way that people find practical in an obvious way. So when we started this whole process of discussing values in the Horizon project EDU4Standards, one of the first questions we got: do you want us to take philosophy classes, or can you please just tell us what we should avoid so we don't get in trouble? And I mean, these are two. This was a very valuable question by one of our colleagues who is a lawyer. Actually, he says, "I don't want philosophy classes. I just want to know what is forbidden, ethically speaking, so I don't get in trouble." And of course, I mean, we do make rules in that way that we say, do not do this, and you won't get in trouble. But we also have a broader context which has to do with human resources and which has to do with human development, which is also a goal in politics, as we hope. And in that, we can use ethics as a compass. So what is the morally right thing to do? And what is the ethically right thing to do? What is forbidden? This is like the lowest point of the whole thing. What is forbidden and what should I not do in order not to get in trouble? And the highest point is, and here we are, it's a means of orientation. It means something we are willing to die for and to live by. These are basically I mean, and you see, it's a wide field. Ethics is a wide field, and in our Western tradition, in the last 20 centuries or 23 centuries, we came up with a couple of different motives. And the question is always, what should I do? What is the right thing to do? And it is connected to the question, what kind of person do I want to be? And here we go back all the way to Plato and Aristotle. They came up with the idea that only an examined life is a good life, as Plato says in the Apology. So what is the good life? We achieve it by being virtuous, by having a good character, by doing the right things, and on a whole, by being content or kind of happy with the kind of life we live. So that means a virtue ethical point means it empowers us to live the life we want to live. And then we have a more modern idea, which goes back to Thomas Hobbes and was formulated by John Rawls in the last century in A Theory of Justice, and that is contractualism. We make contracts. We make contracts. That means we formulate rules, and this is a very standardization thing, actually. We make rules, and because we are part of the rule-making process, we are willing to actually live by those rules. So, and as you know, a lot of discussions, we saw that in Knut's very complicated diagram that shows the process of standard making. It is a very complicated process, and it involves a lot of discussions and discourse. And it needs to be fair, because everybody needs to be included into this process. And then we have care ethics, my personal favorite. It's actually the oldest motive we have in ethics, but it's only been taken into the canon of normative theories in the late 20th century by feminist philosophers. And that means you make sure that others are doing well. And since it's not a cognitive thing, but more an emotional thing, a lot of men who were running the philosophy game didn't take it so seriously. But it is to be taken seriously because, frankly, human beings need care of others until they are 3 years old, physically and mentally much longer. So care ethics should be included. And there have been approaches by John Tronto, for example, to make us think about actually a caring democracy. And maybe standards can help us here there, but maybe we can talk about this later. And then, of course, we have the big players, utilitarianism and deontology. These are the two you will find in every ethics books and in every ethic book. And Utilitarianism is more they are both super rational, rationalistic theories formulated by dead white males. In utilitarianism, it is Jeremy Bentham, who was a social reformer and lawyer in England, and his pupil John Stuart Mill, who was also an English philosopher and also an English politician. So, and their idea is that the outcomes of your deed matter. So if you want to choose the right deed, you have to look at the consequences it will have. And the consequences, so the saying goes, matter more than actually the deed itself. So you can do morally not quite okay things in order to achieve good consequences. And this is, of course, the complete opposite of deontology. Todeon in Greek means this what you have to do, todeon, what you have to do by all means. That means you have to choose the right action. And here we have the categorical imperative by Immanuel Kant from the 18th century. And this is the German version of the rationalistic philosophy, theories, and ethics. Do choose only the one deed that you can choose after a maxim that can be made a general or universal law of action. So, and don't mind the consequences. Yeah, this is the main difference to which these two things are often reduced. Yes, but I was done with this slide. Thanks. So, and then we have to talk about values. Values, that means what we value, what we really care about. And on the individual level, this is exactly who we are. I care about reading books. This is an important thing for me, so I will make sure that books are available. And it also makes our life in a society and our lives as individuals in a society possible and worthwhile. And we can also say that groups basically share similar values. Like me as a reader, I go to libraries and I meet other people who read books. Here we are all interested in standardization, so maybe we value the knowledge about standardization, and this is why we're here. And these values, they can be found at different levels. We have instrumental levels like punctuality, conventions. They can change over time and they are different in different cultures. We have pragmatic values which keep a society together and ensure our good lives and change only slowly. And then the idea is we have also moral values that are universal. They don't change. They are intrinsic and they are valuable in themselves. So on the instrumental level, you could say there can be a good killer because he's punctual and he knows what he's doing and he's very efficient. So, but that it doesn't mean he is a good person. And the moral values are the ones who make us good persons. So, and technology, and now we come to standardization, is usually not a place for ethics. It's rather interested in economic success, and it's guided by efficiency. But we have to look at this later. And now we look at the next slide. So the red words, human dignity, equality, freedom, rule of law, democracy, they are the 5 core values from the European Union, and you find them in all the basic texts. You will also find a set of these moral intrinsic values in basically all the constitutions of all modern democracies, modern liberal democracies, because of, I mean, equality and freedom. These are the 2 values people fought for in the French Revolution, and in the following years there was the idea of human dignity developed, especially in 1948 with the Human Rights Declaration. But we also need rule of law and democracy to integrate the individual into politics, political processes. And of course, what do we have in the center? A human being. And this is what our project does. We talk about value-based rulemaking and value-based considerations. So we put the human in the center. Okay. And the other values, they basically can be derived from the red ones, because these core values, they need context. We have to ask who do we want to be? So that means to put the human in the center, but also which world do we want to live in? And the most important thing is these abstract ideas need context. And this, maybe you could say, this is what we do in our project, EDU4Standards. We put the abstract values into context. So, ethics and standardization, and we go to the next slide. So what we do is we try to bridge ethics and standardization so that the little green people can walk over there. And then what happens next? We have responsible innovation, and that's what we want. And we also have the human-centered and trustworthy technology, services, and processes. If we manage to be human-centered and value-based. So what are the ethical issues in standards and standardization? And it's always a good thing to start with something negative. So we have a negative example on the next slide. We have we can have ethical issues in the process of standard making and in the content of standardization of the standards that we are formulating. So what can they look like? So we go to the next one. So in the process, we can say there is a lack of representation, for example, of women or of people from developing countries when we talk worldwide. It can also be a lack of interdisciplinary expertise and qualifications, or a lack of transparency and accountability. And that means some people have the dominance in decision making and the others are not represented. And of course, there can also always be strained interpersonal relations that make a process difficult. So these are ethical issues at the process level. And we should keep in mind that ethical considerations need to be integrated at the very beginning of the standards development process and throughout all its stages. So that means you should always have this option to, like a whistleblowing, or maybe even this. I mean, we have that, Knut, we have that in EDU4Standards. We have the troubleshooters from Stockholm, right, who just are there to watch the process and to say something if they think that there might be a problem. So the process should have one institution that one part that is actually just watching if everything is going okay, also on the ethical level. So that was the process. And we have also the question of the content. So what would be an unethical standard? It would be a standard that disadvantages certain groups over others, that is not gender responsive. So equality is a super important point. And also a standard that does not consider sustainability aspects, because sustainability is part of our rule of law in Europe. And also standards that do not reflect ethical values and principles at all would be, of course, an unethical standard, but also a standard that does not consider the interest of all affected stakeholders on the receiving end of the standard would be unethical. And an example is a very simple example: crash test dummies. Here we had a gender bias. The dummies were formed on the male body and was not taking care of the female body. Of course, we have a problem with normative measures or measurements of the body in general that we cannot avoid when we make safety instructions. But the crash test dummy was so obvious that it can be considered as an example for unethical standards. So that was an example for the unethical standard. And now we have to see how we can put all these important values that we derive from the European Union's core documents, how we can integrate them into standard making. We have examples where that happens. For example, ISO 53800 from 2024, the guidelines for the promotion and implementation of gender equality and women's empowerment, is a very good example. But also another one that is worldwide making a big difference, and that's ISO 19869 from 2019, that regulates the clean cook stoves and offers clean cooking solutions, and by that helping a lot of people staying healthy who have to use cook stoves and open fires. Yeah, and we go to the next one. What are the frameworks and tools that we develop? There are already some frameworks and tools in place, and I go over that very quickly. We have the IEEE series of standards. We have the approach that we use actually design ethics by design. When we design solutions, we put ethics in there, and that leads us to a value-sensitive design. And we also have other possibilities like AI, the HLEG and ALTAI, but we also have codes of ethics, like the Association of code makers, for example. We have codes of like professional codes of code makers, for example, who vow, like the doctors in the Hippocratic Oath, who vow not to do unethical things. But I think from here we go quickly through the different ways of putting standards into, or ethics into standards. We just look at them quickly. This is the IEEE. You find the source on the bottom of the slide. The next one is actually the European framework. This is an American solution, AI for the people. When AI came up, it developed technically, but it didn't develop ethically. It's a bit like first the car came, and only after a lot of people died, they invented the safety belt and made it a standard procedure. And a bit it was like that with our artificial intelligence. First it galloped away, and then ethics say, hey, wait for me, take me along. And these are basically the possibilities to integrate it. But I want to use the last minutes of my time to show you what we did. So we would go to our slides, Knut. Yeah, so we thought in EDU4Standards, what we want to do is we want to teach about standardization, but first we have to understand this complicated process. We do want to talk about values and how we can integrate them, not just in a particular way as the former examples did it, but we wanted to do it in a very basic way. So we said we have to go through education, and this is exactly what we did. We looked at the
Jetzt los. Oh Mann.
Sorry, I don't know what happened, but
yeah, you are back. You are back.
Yes, I'm back.
Okay, cool.
I'm sorry, and we can go to the next slide. So our framework has 3 parts, and one of the important parts was we had to formulate the intended learning outcomes, and I go directly to them. So before you start a big process of learning, you have to tell everybody where to go, and this is what we did. We formulated the ILOs, and we started at the very start. We started with the age group of babies, and this is a lot of people said, why do you start with the babies? We want to talk about universities. And I said, gentle. We need to know what we need to know when we are young about standards, because standards like ethical values are everywhere. So we started very early, and you can see we have different levels, and they are basically age levels, but they are also levels of academic education. So, and we said we need knowledge, we need skills, and we need responsibility and autonomous behavior. And then on the next slide, you can see it's we did exactly that. We used the levels, and we said, this is the knowledge you need. These are the skills that are comprised in this standard of knowledge. And then in the end, you have responsibility of autonomy. That is what you can do after that as a person by yourself without anybody telling you what to do. And then we have our 5 core values: human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, and the rule of law. And here we explain what the learner is able to do. And for example, here, age group of a teenager, we would expect, I mean, and this has been discussed hotly ever since in our workshops and our pilots in the summer schools. We have been where we try to implement this, and here again we have the taxonomy that you had in your 6 skills that we want you to develop from this class. So, for example, you have the knowledge of facts and the principles, but you also when it comes to human dignity, you are able to evaluate your own value and the value of others. Just one example. So this is what we expect from a teenager, to know that there is some dignity in just being there. And now we can maybe go to the next slide. We have here the level 5, which is the short cycle tertiary education. This is also something that's been implemented or being implemented these months, because it's a short cycle. That means you can have short modules within education. You don't have to do a full degree in standardization, but you learn about standardization and values in shorter periods of time, and you can build up your ECTS or certificates. And then level 6, here we are on the bachelor level. Here we can, of course, expect a little bit more. For example, when we go to the autonomy on the right-hand side, the learner can manage and organize their learning process autonomously and independently. They can participate in collaborative projects by carrying out more complex tasks and taking more responsibility for decision-making within the team, which is an ethical and a very valuable autonomous capacity that we expect here. And then level 7 would be the master level, and level 8, the doctorate level. And we go to the next slide, because I have to leave that to your own consideration. And as you have seen, ethical considerations are part of our everyday lives. They shape who we are, but they also help us to communicate with others. And standards need to be ethical. Maybe they are already ethical. And here I close and say thank you for listening, for staying. And I hope you have some questions, and we have some more minutes to hear them, even if we cannot answer them. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Barbara, for your excellent presentation and very inspiring kind of bringing ethics into standards, which is I think still in an emerging kind of stage, but I think it's badly needed, and therefore thanks a lot for your contribution here. Just checking in the chat. I find here some is there a question? My question is this: as the EU moves towards simplification, streamlining of regulatory framework, how do we ensure that this process doesn't dilute, but instead strengthens the European foundational values and our distinctive way of life in an increasing competitive global landscape? In other words, how can simplification coexist with safeguarding ethical standards, societal protections, and the European model? Barbara. Yeah, that's a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a teacher at the university and I'm a book person, so my answer might not surprise you. I think we have to invest in education and like education that, thank you, Cecilia, I'm very honored. I think we need to really invest in education, and education needs to be more engaging. And that means we need to reconnect people through education. I know it's a very maybe oversimplifying answer, but doing it is not simplifying. It's really you need dedication, and you need a lot of knowledge, and you need to be willing to connect with people. Is that oversimplifying too?
I think it's the base, but I think simplification doesn't really necessarily might lead to ignoring ethical dimensions and values. I think it's becoming tougher to do that. That means if you're also reducing bureaucracy and also kind of administrative requirements, like now we see that the Supply Chain Act has been kind of yeah, a little bit relaxed. It's very difficult to find here the path between, on the one hand, following Draghi's recommendation to increase competitiveness, and on the other hand, consider European values, human rights in supply chains. This is yeah, a tension, and there will be, as I said, another webinar on human rights in the context of another project. But I want to conclude here with big thanks to first the audience joining this webinar. Also thanks to the speakers today, Barbara, last week Mirko Böhm. You will get access to the slides, to the recordings, but you will also get some questions. It means you have to evaluate and give us feedback whether we are on the right track, because this was a pilot, and the objective is to continue with this series next year. Also to maybe continue it beyond the EDU4Standards, maybe also bring it into other projects. And therefore we need your really kind of frank and critical feedback. Therefore you will get emails. We have your emails. You register for the course, and what we will do, we will run another campaign, and please apologize if there are some cross-posting, but maybe you get also a reminder, and you know people who can also maybe join and might be interested in this topic. With this, I close. I wish you a nice, relaxing kind of break during the next weeks until 26 start. And I hope you have a good start, and wish you all the best for 2026. And see you soon, either virtually or reality. I'm looking forward. Thank you. I close here.